Okay, so let's wrap up this video, talk about empiricism, which is another dominant movement in response to rationalism. So the rationalists believe that there were innate ideas, innate rules for processing ideas, and that when you went out in the world, you didn't like create knowledge, you unlocked knowledge. Experience is not the only source of knowledge, and they specifically, like, math is the paradigm for them, right? That's the kind of knowledge that seems like you don't need to experience the world in order to get. Empiricists, on the other hand, thought that all knowledge came from experiences or the senses. So a lot of scientific knowledge would have been what they pointed to. They thought that as we had more and more experience, we would come up with rules of processing further experiences, and that we would be able to like come up with things like math, right? Math is where they're at their weakest. I'm throwing ancient Greece scholars here in Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and the Stoics, even though that is strictly speaking anachronistic. I just want to give you a cartoon version of this. The reading, and now we're going to talk about these ideas of dualism and monism. So we've already talked about dualism. Descartes is a dualist. He believes that the mind and body are fundamentally distinct. They're different kinds of things, fundamentally different. A monist believes that the world is made up of only one thing. You can have you can be a materialist, believe that only physical objects exist, or an idealist, believe that only ideas and minds exist. There are very few idealists left, but it is a thing that people have argued. Whenever I do this poll in class, I get about, I don't know, maybe 30 to 40% dualists, and the rest believe that they're materialists of some stripe. That might be true for this class as well. Unfortunately, I have no way of knowing because I'm staring at my computer. You're staring at my screen, or maybe, I don't know, playing Fortnite or something. So, okay, empiricists. We'll talk about some of the monists. Well, actually, most empiricists were monists. We'll talk about the materialists, who believe that there's no such thing, no separate part of the body that's the soul. And the mind is just the way the body becomes aware of itself, I guess. Materialists tended to believe that we would eventually come up with laws of nature that would explain even our minds. Emotions are just chemicals, ideas, and everything are just going to be fancy ways of arranging nature. This is a time period where science had made some pretty heavy advancements, so you can imagine their optimism might not have seemed that misplaced. So there's an argument by Locke on why he thinks that the mind is actually a blank slate. First, there's no principle that is actually accepted by everybody. And if you don't believe that we can have ideas that we're not aware of, then it must be that there are no innate ideas, right? Because if there's not a single shared, if the intersection of all individual people's ideas doesn't have a single shared idea, and there's nothing that was hidden from them the entire time, then when they started off, they must have had nothing. So everything must have come from the senses, all ideas. There are no innate ideas. It's a direct argument against Descartes, who thought that there was an innate idea of God, and where would it come from except that God himself put it there, right? The empiricists denied this. John Locke had a particular view of identity. So we talked about who you are, who your personal identity is. And it essentially, for Locke, is what your memory is. It's just a string of memories, right? So the general remembers his time as a cadet, therefore they are the same creature, the same person, the same entity. This is a view a lot of people have, but almost immediately after Locke, there's an argument against it where you say, okay, suppose the cadet remembers when he was a boy at school, and the general remembers when he was a young soldier. Therefore, the young soldier is the same as the boy in school, and the general is the same as the young soldier. But if the general doesn't remember being a young boy, they are not the same. And this is one of those little annoying problems for this view of identity. There's another view of monism that empiricists championed. This was idealism. And this is the view that there is no such thing as matter. Everything is just ideas. So if you think that you might be a brain in a vat, this might actually be very enticing. The external world is just a bunch of ideas. And the thing that keeps them there is that there is observers are looking at them. Even when there's no human observers, God is the ultimate observer. So I just needed to get that out of the way to show you that it was conceptually possible. An argument against the memory view of identity, and reminiscent of the Buddhist discussions from the other video, is David Hume's idea of the self as a bundle. When he says, you look into yourself, you like really think about who you are, and you'll find thoughts, you'll find sensations and experiences, but there's nothing else. And from moment to moment, the thoughts change and the experiences change and the emotions change. What if we're all just that? It's an idea to wrestle with. Buddhists have been wrestling with it for thousands of years. There are a variety of other philosophers in this tradition. Amo, the first African to earn a PhD from Europe, argued that these Western traditions, these European traditions, had really tried to abstract away from the body too much. And even the words that we use, like impressions, we think about the world impressing itself on your senses, right? But if thought is a part of the body, if you must essentially be embodied, then all of that goes away. So Amo's ideas end up being rescued or redeveloped in cognitive science, as we'll see in the back chunk of this semester. David Hartley, John Stuart Mill might seem familiar to some people, right? These people argued that the mind must be in the brain, but perhaps we couldn't have a deterministic understanding of the mind. Not like physics, it's a little bit squishier. At least for Mill, Hartley pointed out that you can be drunk, which is a good thing to point out. Because if you're drunk, that seems like your body has affected your mind in some serious way. Okay. The empiricists didn't get the last word. There were responses to empiricists, right? These were people that thought that maybe there are some innate truths, or at least innate intellect, innate possibility of exploring the world, right? Like you don't leave a laptop in nature and it learns how to turn itself on. There's got to be something that your mind is doing that lets it gather knowledge, lets it figure out how to process information. The raw processing power doesn't do it by itself. Kant had an entirely different approach. When he was confronted with empiricism, he thought, okay, well, maybe empiricists forgot to ask the question about how experience itself is possible. And he writes a really, really long book and then rewrites it and then gets tired that nobody understood it, so he writes a shorter version of it and people seem to understand that, where he argues this perspective. Okay, so that's the end of that video. The next video will focus on the unconscious mind.